my friends, Jerry Rosa here in the Rosa String Works workshop, getting ready to start on a rush job. Yes, we do rush jobs here occasionally, and we will be putting a video out about that a little bit more in detail and about our place where you can stay while we're doing your rush job. We have a retreat here on the farm. We call it the Valley Springs Ranch Retreat, and it's in conjunction with Rosa String Works, of course. We've got a really nice place to stay, and Mr. Goins from Ohio is here right now. He is staying there this evening, and he wants me to fix up his father's guitar and have it ready for him to go while he's staying here, and then he can take it back with him to Ohio. So that is an option. We are going to charge more for that option. We'll talk about all of that down the road too in another future video. But right now, we're going to show you the guitar because it's not your average father's guitar. It looks like this. Yes. It's an old Gibson. And you think, wow, what kind of guitar is that? Many of you probably have never seen a guitar like this. They're not real common. I've only had a couple in the shop over the years. This is a Style O guitar. This one is a 1912, and it's in remarkably good shape. Very few problems at all, but there are a few problems, and we're going to take care of those. I'm pulling this up to keep it from touching the top and bouncing and hitting the top. But it's pretty darn cool, don't you think? Style O, 1912. So what is it in here for? Well, we're going to do a fret job on it, set up that way. We're going to fix little problems that it has. One of the problems, it needs to be addressed. There's a crack in it right here. It goes up through here. And it is an open crack. It's not just in the finish or anything. So we need to fix that. There's a little flake of binding. I think this probably came loose and somebody forced it back in there and it broke and then glued it in place. So we're going to try to fill that in best we can. The same problem on this side, but this side here, the binding is completely loose, as you can see. So, but it won't go back down in there, at least not without heating it. We're going to try heating it and see if we can force it into place and glue it. And if that works, then great. Otherwise, we may have to actually physically cut it, push it down in there, put a new piece in between the cut. There's some other little issues, minor issues, like I feel something right here. This could be loose, this strip of inwood. I think it is actually loose. I think there's a problem there, and we'll address that. So we're really going to address every little detail that we can find on it while it's here. And so I've got my work cut out for me to try to get this done as quick as possible. And here we go. The very first thing I'm going to do is remove this tailpiece because they just flop up and down constantly and bang the top, and I don't want that to happen while I'm working on it. I've got a lot of work to do to it, and I want to get that done as quick as possible. This end pin has been broken and glued back together. That's the original end pin. We may just go ahead and keep that as is and use it, or potentially, put a new one in here and he could keep this one in the case or something. I don't know. I'll talk to him about that. And by the way, Mr. Goins brought me a little gift too, which is kind of nice, some CA glue. This is the extra thick CA glue, and it has the accelerator with it. Well, that accelerator is very handy regardless whether we use the extra thick or not. The extra thick is great though for filling big holes. I'm going to do the cosmetic things first and the structural things first before we get down to the fret job. This structural issue here where I can see the top moving, we're going to get glue in here and get this clamped up. Let that start drying. That's going to be the first thing. As a matter of fact, it's late in the day. I may just go ahead and glue this up and let it set overnight so that that's good and stable for working on it tomorrow. And I think I can finish up the rest of it tomorrow without too much trouble. Just this one thing needs to set overnight, I think. Okay, the way we're going to attempt to fix this, this is a hairline crack, but it is definitely all the way through the top. So the way I'm going to fix that is I'm going to run water down in the crack. Water will penetrate when the glue won't. And if you soak it with water first, there's a good chance that the glue will go down in there a lot better. And some people would say, well, you're going to make the joint weak, but not really. You're not getting that much water going on in a thing like this. You're just trying to find a path for the glue to follow. That's all this is. And the glue will follow the water much easier than it will going in there dry. And there's just not that much water going down in there. So now we'll take the glue. I'm going to see if I can actually squeeze it, force it down in there with the glue bottle a little bit. Work it up and down like that, and the glue will also get in the crack a little bit better. And then I've got the little suction cup to try to force it in there a little bit. That helps a little also, especially if you can spread the crack a little bit. I'm going to look inside to see if I can see any penetration at all. It's doubtful, to be honest, but I'm going to see. Well, I can see a little bit of water staining there where the water has come through, but I don't actually see any glue. Try a little more glue, a little more suction action. A lot of people talk about syringes. I can't get the syringe thing to work very well for me. I know other people seem to be able to get it to work great, but for me the syringe thing's just more hype than it is reality for me. I mean, there are certain circumstances where the syringe is the only tool, but they're rare. Yeah, I can see glue squeezing out now. Let me see if I see anything on the inside now. Truthfully, I don't. You know, this would have been a candidate for CA glue, there's no doubt about it. But the problem with the CA glue is that it could really hurt this old finish. And I don't want to take a chance on that. It's not worth it, in my opinion, to take that chance, take that risk, and end up messing up an old finish. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take a brush, a little stiffer brush, and I'm going to try to poke the glue down in there a little bit more. Sometimes that works too. I can actually see white glue coming out in there now. Yeah, there's three little drops, or little tiny bubbles, or whatever you want to call it. So that's making me feel a little better. You know that we're getting it in there some. It's those 3 bubbles are up in this area up here, so we're going to work on the back area a little more, and I just used the wrong brush. Try to just force it down in there basically. See if that helped any more. No, not really. The back part of this doesn't seem like it's going in there as good. Alright, that's probably as good as I'm going to be able to get it. I think it's probably sunk in there sufficiently anyway. I can actually see a little bit more glue way back there now, but not much. I do think we've got enough in there that'll make it work. Trying to make the bottle act like a syringe a little bit. Okay, so I'm going to get me a clamp put across here now, and I think we'll see some squeeze out come out of there. Well, I think you can probably see the glue squeeze out there on the line It's not very much, definitely squeezing out there. I think you can see the line of it right in through here, and it goes all the way to the back end. I'm going to look inside now and see if that caused the glue to squeeze out with the clamp on there. Oh yeah. Oh yeah, all the way almost. When I say almost, all but the last little tiny bit right here, I can see squeeze out on the inside, and it's about the same amount. It's a very minute amount, so it's not like it's a big deal. Now I'm going to wipe across that and see if we can feel the crack. I think the crack is pretty well level. Yeah, it feels like it is. So I think we're good shape. Now this sound hole is made in such a way that I can only get my hand in going this direction because of this thing here. So I have to put my hand in this way and then turn my wrist around once I get it in there. And then I got to get this rag in there, and I'll get in there and wipe off the glue on the inside. This is a very tiny sound hole. Yeah, that's good. I can't get my hand back out because of that, so I have to turn my hand back around and go out that way. That little knob right there nails you. Okay, let me look inside one more time just to make sure it's clean. I think it will be though. Oh yeah, it's perfect. It's just perfect. So we're in very, very good shape there on this crack now. Knowing that we got glue all the way through. I've got a piece of leather here under this clamp. These clamps look big and bulky, but they're aluminum and they're hollow to boot, so they're very lightweight. They're just a cheap Harbor Freight clamp, but they work great for things like this. So I'm just going to let that set overnight and do its thing, because that way it'll be really strong and I won't have to worry about that anymore. So while that crack is sitting there, I thought I might just spend a couple more minutes, not very much time, but just a couple minutes, looking at this truss rod. Being that this is a 1912 guitar, it surprised me that it even had a truss rod. But then I looked online, and many of this style guitar have truss rods. So I guess that's a common thing for this guitar. Just wanted to see how it was made. It looks like it is just a typical hex nut. I'm going to see if I have a wrench that will fit it, and I do. Looking down it, there's a considerable underbow. I was hoping that this would be loose. It is a little loose. It's not real loose, but it's not real tight either. That may be all I need to do to get rid of that underbow, because it is a fairly significant underbow. Yeah, I can still see it now. I just saw it by eye and I could tell it was pretty significant. And with the straight edge on there right now, well, let's just see if we can tell how many thousandths it is. I would say it looks like it's 15 or 20 thousandths still, even after tightening it. It might be even more than that, I don't know. Maybe not. Well, no, it's not too bad right now. Yeah, actually, it's about 15 thousandths. That's what I figured it probably was, somewhere in that ballpark. Yep, about 15 thousandths. So to me, I would take some more of that out of there if I could, and I think I'll tighten this up a little bit more. And see if we can tell now. Now it's just barely does go under there now, but it's probably still at least 12 thousandths. I would like to see it get almost perfectly flat, because I figure the strings will pull it back in there. That's about all I've got there on strength to tighten it. That is significantly better. We're probably 10 thousandths now or so. I may let that relax overnight and let it sit there like that and try tightening it some more in the morning. Good morning, my friends. It's day 2 of working on this masterfully engineered old antique 1912 guitar. It is fun to work on something like this. That crack that used to be there is pretty much gone. You can still see it, of course, lightly, but you kind of got to be looking for it now. And once we polish and buff out the top, it might even go away a little bit more. But it is definitely solid, no problem at all. So we move on to the next hardest job on this, and that is fixing this. And this could actually be the hardest job. Yeah, we just have to see how it goes. All right, so this is the part we're working on here. It's definitely loose. It is definitely not going back in there. I could push as hard as I want to push and it will only break. It will not bend and go back in that slot. I guarantee you that. I'm getting out the heat gun. I get, reamed all the time. People say, oh, you burnt it or you melted it or you did this or you did that. And the truth is, this thing is infinitely adjustable. It goes from cold air to incredibly hot air. And I can adjust it however I think it's necessary. Right now, I'm blowing it on my hand to test how hot it is. You can tell it's not very hot because I'm holding my hand there now for how long has it been? I don't think that's quite hot enough to get the plastic soft enough, so I'm going to try to turn it up just a little bit. That might be warm enough. I don't know. It's not real hot. I would say the temperature on this is like the hottest setting on your hair blower right now. I can tell there's a little more give to it already. I'm going to heat the longer piece of this in hopes that it'll stretch back to its original position. I don't really think it's warm enough yet, but it is stretching a little bit now. It's not going to be soft enough to stretch that far though. I don't know if you can see how far it still needs to go, but it's quite a ways yet. And it's not going, so I don't know. Probably the best thing to do is just to cut it. As you can see, it's already been cut on this side and somebody's already put it back together that way with a gap. I don't like that, but honestly, I don't think it's going to stretch. I'm going to turn the heat up a little bit more, try it one more time. Pretty warm, but I don't think it's really going to work. I'm tempted to try it with the glue and the rubber band around it and see if that will hold it. I kind of think it might, but honestly, I think it'll just shrink and when it cools and pull back out. I really don't think it's going to last. It's pretty tight. Right now I still cannot get it all the way in there. So to me that indicates you better just try something else. It's just not really wanting to cooperate. Sometimes I've had success where you just push them right in there, no problem. Not so much on this one. It's really not going. And I'm afraid if I heat it up much more, I might actually catch it on fire. Some of this old binding is incredibly flammable, and I imagine this is part of it. As bad as I hate it, I'm going to cut it and push it in there, glue it, and we'll fill it with another piece. I think that's the best option. Unfortunately, I think that's about the only option. So I think I'm going to cut it with these side cutters here, and they do a pretty good job. You can try sawing this, but you can actually scratch something or make the problem worse. So I think you're better off just breaking it there. You can see that it's close, but it just didn't want to go. So now we'll do our best to find a piece of binding that we can fit in both places and make it more or less disappear. Now for the touchiest part of the operation, I have cut this little tiny piece of plastic. If I can get the camera to focus on that, probably not. Anyway, I am going to try to force that into the crack. I have actually cut a tiny kind of a bevel on it on both sides so that it can go in and wedge itself in there tightly. I think it might go, but it's honestly hard to say. I also straightened these edges off. This is the one that was already broken. So anyway, the problem with this is getting it to fit tight and making the seam go away. And so I'm going to use this Beacon 527 glue, which actually melts the plastic. And once the plastic is sufficiently melted, then I believe the patch will go in there and melt to it. I am moving the glue around in there with a toothpick. And it would be nice if the guitar would sit on its side there, but no, it won't. So I have to work and hold the guitar at the same time. And now I'm going to try to force this down in there. I could not get it in there dry, but I thought it was so close to going that I thought if I melted the other two pieces of plastic, it will go, and it did. And yet it still is fighting me. This is a leather working tool that has been invaluable for working on instruments. I use it all the time for pushing and smoothing and rounding. It's just, it's for making indentations and things in leather. It's just really handy. Pulling stitches through with this in. But it's just a great tool for working on old instruments too. I use it all the time. There, I got it down in there where I want it with that tool. Now, granted, it's not a perfect color match, but you know, you can't have all of the bindings in all the colors and the sizes. There's just no way for matching things like this. I wish I did, but I don't. And I chopped off the extra little piece there, so it's getting in there. We will let that sit now and relax, and it should dry. And then once it's dried, we should be able to make it go away a little bit better by smoothing it off. Now we'll work on this side. Now the complexity on this side is I can't keep this open because it's not glued already. I could go ahead and glue this one in place and then force that one in, and that might be the easier way to handle it. But I'm going to try to do it all at once, just because I'm a glutton for punishment. So I'll try cutting another piece that hopefully will fit in that slot. I had actually cut a piece and I thought it would work, but it just seemed like it was not the right size. I'm going to try it again just to see if maybe I wasn't holding my mouth right the first time, because it sure seemed like it should fit. It actually does fit, but I'm not sure it's tight enough. It's real close to being tight enough. It's so perfectly close that you could probably get away with that. But when you look at it up real close, there's little tiny gaps. Now they're kind of going away. Actually, I think it'll work. Once I force it all toward that, it's pinching it pretty well. And once I put the softening glue on there, I think it'll actually work. The problem with this one is I need to glue the whole thing, and I don't want to glue it with this because this stuff will eat up the finish. You got to be very careful with this stuff. So I think I'm more or less going to do what I said I didn't want to do, and that is I think I'm more or less going to tack it in place with this super phatic glue. Once it's kind of holding itself there, then I'll force this into place with this kind of glue. Simple but complicated. Just like always. This piece is loose all the way to the tip, which is, you know, you could argue you could just put it all back in one piece, but the problem is I don't have anything that matches that well, and I would just as soon use the original piece even though it's short. The advantage of this stuff is that it's water soluble, so it's water cleanup. Therefore, you don't have to worry too much about making a mess on the finish. That seems to be tacking up and holding that fairly well. Now, if I can do the same thing on this side. This side doesn't seem to want to hold quite as well, at least in the early stages. I think if I hold it there still for a few minutes, it'll probably stay in place. What I'm wanting to do is get the rubber on there, so I want to get this glued up with the Beacon 527 as quick as possible, and it never fails, but the Beacon 527 is spewing out of the end of the tube right now when it's the most critical time, and I'm poking the Beacon 527 glue down in there to soften the tips of that binding. And now I'm going to force this piece back in there, and the tricky part on this is getting it turned the right way because it's almost a perfect shape. Now it doesn't seem to want to go, which is par for the course. Okay, I think that's in pretty good shape. So now I'm going to get the rubber bands and rubber band this up for about 30 minutes or so and let that glue set. Well, my friends, I have got the binding all fixed there. You can see the patch, but you know, it's not too bad, and it's stable now. I think that's the key thing. I also stabilized this little area right back in here with some CA glue because these were kind of moving a little bit right here where this little decorative strip goes through. The ends were coming loose, but I think they're fine now, so I think that was a good call. I haven't looked at the neck joint here yet, but this has been repaired. Someone who did it did a pretty nice job. They put a pin through here. I think they said they put a bolt or a screw or something through here, and then they covered it up with this plug and carved it back. So they did a nice job on that. I'm wondering if that's going to be solid when we string it up, but I think it will be. I've also, tightened the truss rod again this morning after I tightened it yesterday, so everything should be straight on the neck now. I'm going to do a light fret dressing real quick and polish these frets up. I'm not going to film that because I've filmed it so many times in other videos, but basically I'm just going to lightly level all the frets, and then I'll use a recrowning tool to recrown them, and then I'll buff them out with some like 600 sandpaper to make them nice and smooth. Well, my friends, this fretboard is coming loose on this guitar, and it's actually loose quite a ways back. I don't know if you can see here, but I imagine I can take that paper a long ways. You can see it goes up that far, sticking in there, and probably could go further. I have a feeling it's just all loose. Tightening the truss rod as I did, could have had something to do with that. I don't know that it did. I noticed it loose after I started filing the frets. I could feel the fretboard move. That's how I knew it was loose. So I don't really know if tightening the truss rod caused it or not, but it could have. It's possible. Anyway, I'm holding it up a little bit with that little piece of leather there, you can see. And I'm going to get in there with a flat blade and try to clean it out as best I can. And squirt glue in there, and then we'll clamp her back down. I think it'll be fine. So here we go. I was looking for this tool. Caleb had it, and he has put sandpaper on both sides. you know, ordinarily that might not be what I want, but right now it is. I think it's going to work just fine for getting in there and cleaning this out. Yeah, there's quite a bit of stuff fell out of there, so I think it's in pretty good shape. I don't feel anything in the way, so I think the best thing to do is just get the glue in there and clamp her back down. All right, I think maybe this thing will cooperate now, and I'll get glue down in here. I think that's pretty good. I don't think that's going to be a problem. We'll do a little cleanup here and clamp that down. As you can see, the glue is squeezing out there, and it's looking pretty good. I think we've got a good job there, a good contact. So I'm going to go ahead and get that clamped up. I'm going to use these clamps. These can put a lot of pressure on there, and I want to make sure I do get quite a bit of pressure on there. They've got rubber ends on both ends. And I'm putting a piece of leather on the underside because the underside is typically softer wood and could dent. So I've got leather between it also. And that looks good. The squeeze out on it is just about right. It looks like it's all going to clamp up fine. The only negative is, since this is a rush job, I'm going to have to wait about an hour before I continue. Well, my friends, the nut popped off of this during all the work on this loose fretboard, and what's cool about this nut is that it is mother of pearl. Now it's tarnished to the point where you couldn't tell that on the top, you know, and so I'm just going to clean it up. I've got some, this is 220 sandpaper here, and I'm just going to clean it up a little bit with that. And that makes it look real nice and clean again. And then we might need to go to a finer grit to polish it back up. Anyway, it's looking pretty nice. That you don't see the mother of pearl as the nut very often. I mean, it's not that uncommon, but on the other hand, you don't see it real often. So it's going to be nice to have that on there. Looks really cool. Once again, I'm going to clean this old binding. It's just gotten cruddy over the years. If you look at this right here, you watch how it'll change when you go over it with the scraper, and all you're doing is scraping off the junk. And it looks so much better when you do that. And I'm scraping it very lightly. I'm really not taking off any plastic. I'm only taking off the crud that's just accumulated over the years. And some of it is probably a little bit of finish, to be perfectly honest with you, but it's gotten to the point where you can't really even see how nice looking the binding is. So to me, once it gets that bad, it's no longer patina. It's more like creeping crud. And now you can actually see the ivoroid pattern that's in the binding. You could not even see the ivoroid in there before. Couldn't see it at all. It just looks one color now. It just looks so much better. And that will also probably make it match the little pieces I put in better too. Here's a nice big nick in the binding. It's a shame that has to be there. It's a big, fairly large nick in the binding right here. And if I could get that out, it would be nice. But honestly, it's almost impossible to get that out. So what I'm trying to do is just round it over, smooth it out. Just kind of like, again, like tape and drywall. You just fade it. You know, you just feather it out. And that's kind of what I'm doing here. Instead of a deep gouge, I'm trying to feather it a little bit. And then you won't hardly see it. Get rid of the dirt that's down in there really deep. That looks much better to my eye. And I'm not going to show the whole thing of cleaning this, but I'm going to clean it all and let you see what it all looks like when we're done. Well, my friends, I've done all the cosmetic cleaning, all the binding all the way around, everywhere, inside here, everywhere. And it looks pretty nice. I didn't try to make it look brand new nice. I just cleaned the creep and crud off of it. I think while I was doing that, I think I've defined the difference between creep and crud and patina is if the creep and crud distorts the design. In other words, you can't see the design in the object, then it's creep and crud. If you can see the design in it, then it's patina. And you could not see the design in the binding and things like that. It was gone. So to me, that's just creep and crud. So we got rid of it. My next dilemma, this saddle has been broken and he has glued it back, or somebody has glued it back. And, you know, it's probably fine. You know, I don't know that I really want to make a new one of those, but I could, I guess. Maybe I should, just to have it as a safeguard. But more than that, the height of this is just looks ridiculous right now. Now it may change when I put strings on here, but right now it looks totally ridiculous. When you lay the straight edge on here, right down the fretboard, this straight edge is a full, and I'm not exaggerating, a full 3/8 of an inch below the top of this, which would mean if you elevate that up to the string height, then you're going to have at least a 5/16 inch gap down here. That's more than a 1/4 of an inch. 1/4 of an inch is 250 thousandths. Add about another 60 thousandths to that, and you're talking roughly 310 or so thousandths, a little more than that even. And that's really high, considering that typically down here 100 thousandths is considered relatively high. So it's 3 times the normal height. That's just based on eyeball look measurements at the moment. Haven't actually put strings on it to measure it, but that would be my guess right now, would be that high above the fretboard. I haven't oiled the fretboard yet. The other thing that's weird about this is how cockeyed it is. Can you see how cockeyed it is? See how thick the bridge feet is here and the foot is very thin here? So it's, when you set it on a flat surface, it's setting at an angle like that. Of course, I'm exaggerating, but that's what it's doing. When you set it on here and you look down this, it's sort of close. It's not real close, but it's not terribly far off either. I would say the thick side is still high compared to the level of this. So if this is all high, well, the one thing I am going to try to do is level this out a little bit. I'm just debating on whether I need to spend the time and the customer's money to make a new one of these, because that's not an easy thing to make and make it look original, I guess. So basically I would be making an original copy, an original reproduction, which is kind of like jumbo shrimp, an oxymoron. But I'm just debating on whether that's strong enough to hold the strings. I think it is, actually. I don't think I need to spend my time on it, but you never know. By the way, Caleb and I have just been talking back and forth, and we don't think this is the actual original bridge. There's 2 or 3 reasons why we don't think it's the original bridge. The main reason just being simply the patent date that's on the back here. What the patent date actually says is January 18-21. So that would either mean 1918 to 1921, or it means January 18th, 1921. Either one of those dates is long after this guitar, which is roughly 1912. So we don't think this is the original bridge, though it may be for all we know. We're going to clean up this now and get the creep and crud off of here. The customer asked that I make this look better. The problem with this is that it's been plated here and the plating has come off. So yeah, I can clean it up, but it's not going to look, you know, that much better, to be honest. I do think it needs to be cleaned up, but I don't think it's going to look all that terribly great in terms of one consistent color or anything when I get done. Well, I already know some of you won't like this at all. Now this is still nickel colored, you know, and the wires appear to have some nickel coloring on them still, but this piece here, all of the nickel has gone off of there. You know, it was just flaking off. It was just almost like powder, and there was no saving it. So I did the next best thing, and that is just buffed it out to a almost mirror finish in the brass. It looks nice. You know, brass always tarnishes and turns dark, so it'll do that over time. But anyway, it is cleaned up now, and it is ready to go back on the guitar. And then we can start to understand how high the strings are, because I do think they're going to be very high. I thought I would point out an interesting thing about this. This can only go on this tailpiece one way, so you can't turn it around or do anything like that. The bevels for the string buttons are in the front here, so you think, well, why would that be? You know, you think, well, turn it around, and so there is no way to turn it around. There's no holes on this side. You know, I pretty much figured this out on my own. I said, well, the string has to go over the top, come underneath, and then hang in this hole. Well, sure enough, Caleb looked it up, and that's how they used this particular tailpiece. They did do it that way. So that's the way we're going to be doing this. It's going to look a little weird to some folks, I'm sure, but that is the way this tailpiece is designed, and sure enough, that's the way they're supposed to use it. So enough talk, let's get started with that. Two more things I wanted to point out on this guitar before I start putting strings on it. If you were to go straight down the center of this tailpiece after it's connected up here, it would come off this direction. I mean, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but the straight on would be like this. So it's missing the neck altogether. In other words, it would have to be over about that far to be lined up with the neck. So I'm sure the strings will pull it over there, but I just thought that was kind of strange that just connecting it up raw without strings, it's not lined up down the center line at all. That's point number one. Point number two here is this is the original tail pin. It's been glued back together. You know, this is a very important thing. If a person puts a strap on here, you don't want this to fail, because the guitar will hit the ground and bust it into pieces. So I'm going to make a new tail pin, and it'll be a very nice high quality tail pin out of ebony. And this one can just be kept with the guitar for keepsake purposes. But this is not real easy to do, to be perfectly honest with you. Sometimes the peg shavers work on things like this, and sometimes they don't. Let me just see if I can get the shaver to work on this. Don't think it's going to, honestly. It might. It looks like it is, actually. I'm going to try turning this with the plastic pliers, considering my hands are just not up to the task these days. Well, this is where I start doing this by hand, because I'm afraid it's going to fit sloppy if I don't. I always look and see where the shiny parts are after you put it in there and you spin it. Wherever it becomes shiny, that's where it's touching, and you just need to get rid of that shiny part. So I'm scraping that off, and I try to be real even on my scraping there. I put it back in, turn it again, and knock off just the high spots. this ensures the angle that it's going in on is exactly the same by doing it this way, where this and that, the angles may not match. But at least I took the big bulk of it off with the shaver, and now I can take the rest of it off this way. Now you just pretty much got to have patience to do this. It's a lot of trial and error, but it works better than any other method I can think of, and it just flat guarantees that the peg will be absolutely perfectly tight when you're done. It's kind of like the carbon paper deal with setting a neck. You have to know what you're looking for, and you can definitely see it shine where it's rubbing if you know what you're looking for. In fact, I'll show you the difference before and after. I'll clean it off, and then I'll show you what it looks like clean, and then put it in and twist it. Maybe you can see what I'm looking at. Alright, so that's what it looks like clean. Now look mostly at the end down here. It's from about midway down is really what you're going to be looking at, because that's where this one's rubbing. So look at that, and it's nice and clean. No, it's just kind of dull colored, all one color. Now watch, after I put it in here and twist it, you'll probably be able to see some shininess to it in that area. And now, hopefully you can see the shininess. And the shininess is what you have to cut off. I don't know if that's coming across on the video because I cannot tell just looking at the viewfinder, but anyway, that's what I do. I can see it with my eye as plain as day. But it does take a while to do it this way, and there's no doubt about it. You know, if you had a shaver that was exactly at the right taper for this particular instrument, then it would be fine. I could just use the shaver. But if I kept going with the shaver, this would have some sort of a loose fit by the time it got in there. This way it'll fit absolutely, completely, perfectly tight all the way the full length of the peg. It goes in just a little further each time you do it. This method, believe it or not, keeps you shaving it smooth, believe it or not, because you think, well, you would start shaving one side more than the other or whatever, but all the shiny parts is what you take off. And so if you're carving it uneven, that unevenness will show up as a shiny part. And now we're up to about this depth right here. So we're about this deep into it right now. We need to get where we're just about a 1/16 of an inch or less from there, and then we can tap it in the rest of the way. I'm actually shaving the full length of it this time because I think it's starting to get a little bit of a bulge up at the big end, and so this will help it go in further. I also want to get this end pin in there before I string it up, and the reason is that it actually does help hold that tailpiece by design. So I don't really want to string it up with just the little 3 screws holding it. Yeah, we're getting very close now. We're 1/8 inch away probably, and The problem is, if you drive it in there like that, you could split the whole block and bust it. So you don't want to do that. You want to get real close to having it a tight fit before you drive it in that last little tiny bit. Kind of think it might go this time. It's so very close. I'm pretty sure I could tap it in. Yep, I think I can tap it in now. In fact, I can just push it in the rest of the way. There it is. So it's in there. Trust me, you're not pulling that out of there. Once you get it in there like that, it's not coming out. It's seriously, I wouldn't be afraid at all to grab a hold of that and hold the whole guitar up by the end. It will not come out. Not easily anyway. The only way you can get these back out now is take these screws out, put little wooden wedges under the metal plate here, and it'll pop it out eventually. But that's about the only way you'll get that out of there. I'm going to go ahead and use the saddle that's here right now. If it turns out that it looks like it's going to be a problem, I'll make a new one. The only other thing I'm going to do is put the linseed oil on this. That's the boiled linseed oil. Everyone always asks me, which oil do I use? It's the boiled linseed oil. That's the only kind I use. I just put all 6 strings on. I don't have them tightened up enough yet. They're all real loose. But just looking at the general setup of it, and I was definitely correct. This is high enough you could not only throw a dog through here, but I think you could actually throw a St. Bernard through there. It's really high. I don't know how well that'll show up, but it's super high. Just as an example, this gauge only goes up to 150 thousandths, and I'm pretty sure the whole gauge will go under there without any problem. Yeah, I think it's hard to tell, but I think the gauge will go under the, see, it doesn't even touch right there. That's the handle. So the handle goes under there. So it's really high. The trick is trying to decide how much to take off to get it where you want it. Okay, so I'm going to tune it up to pitch. That way I can get a more accurate measurement. If it's 150 thousandths too high, we'll have to take off 300 thousandths back here. I mean, I don't really know how too high it is. I don't think it's quite that too high, but it's pretty high. So we'll see here in a minute once we tune it up. Okay, so the small e is 125 thousandths high. Not high, but that's the height of it, is 125 thousandths. Should be around 80, so that's quite high. This one should be around 100, and it's at 200, so it's twice as high as it should be on this side, on the base. So, exaggerations, maybe a skinny St. Bernard you could throw through there, but probably not a full-grown St. Bernard. But regardless, you could throw something through there. It's pretty darn tall. It really is. It's unplayable, really, in my opinion. At the first fret, I'm a little concerned that it may just be too low once I drop it back here at the bridge, because it's not real high at the first fret already. So when I drop it down here that much, it might be too low at the first fret. A little concerned about that. But we've got to do what we have to do, and I'm going to take it off the feet because the feet are so unlevel as it is. That'll level up the feet a whole lot. So now we have to do the math. I want this to be 80 thousandths, so that is 45 thousandths too much on the little e side, and I want this to be 100 thousandths, so that's 100 thousandths too much on the big e side, and I really kind of want it to be 90 thousandths, so it's really 110 thousandths too much. I'm just going to go for it. That's a lot, but we're going to go for it. So I have to double both of those numbers. So over here we're 45 thousandths too high, so I'm going to need to take 90 thousandths off of the treble foot, Over here, we're 110 thousandths too high, so I'm going to need to take off 220 thousandths. That's a quarter of an inch off of this side. Crazy. For my millimeter friends, divide those numbers by 40 and you'll have approximately the millimeters. So 220 divided by 40, and I'm not going to do that on camera, so there you go. Anyway. Wow. I don't know if I can get that much off of this. I could, but it would just make a mess out of it, I'm sure. So I don't think I want to take that much off of this. I don't think this is the original bridge, and that may be part of the problem. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some of it off of the foot of the bridge in an attempt to even up the feet, and then I'm going to have to take some off of the bottom part of the saddle, I think. It's going to be a complicated adjustment. So here I go. Well, the truth of the matter is I can't take enough off of these feet in order to make this where I want it. So I've took off 90 thousandths off of this foot, and I took 50 thousandths off of this foot. That gets me part of the way there, but not that close. I'm going to try to take off the rest of it off the bottom of the saddle. But first, I'm just making sure that the feet are sitting really flush. And by just sitting the sandpaper on there and leaving the string tension pushing down on the bridge as you slide this back and forth, it really does make the feet make perfect contact. And that's what you want. You want as perfect a contact as you can get on the top. And that looks really good. You can see probably that it's sanding off pretty evenly. There's a little light spot there in the middle. There could be a little tiny air gap there, but it's pretty darn close. Okay, so I think what I'm going to do is tune it back up to pitch yet again, see where I'm at now that I can actually measure it with my gauge better, and then I'll know how much I need to take off of this saddle to make it work. Well, the adjustment that I made helped it a lot, more than I thought. It's about 140 on this side now and about 95 or so on this side. So we don't need to take a lot more off of the treble side, but we do need to take, you know, a good chunk off of the bass side yet. So I'm going to take that off of the feet of the saddle this time, and I think that we can get it down to where it's pretty darn reasonable. Caleb was playing around on the guitar, and I thought he was picking something there that I thought you all would like to hear on it. So here he goes. Well, that was pretty nice. Thanks, Caleb. Well, my friends, we are finished with this old 1912 Style O guitar. Oh my goodness, is this thing a beauty or what? You really would have to look a long time to find one in this good a shape, in this good of original shape, without a ton of repairs. Yeah, we've got one little repair right there, one repair here on the neck, and that's about it. The binding has been repaired a place or two, but binding hardly counts. In terms of structure, there's only 2 repairs that I know of on the guitar. It's in really good shape. The fretboard is just looks like brand new, really. I mean, look at the fretboard there. It just looks like a new fretboard. It's not wore, there's no pits. I have got the action down to where it's really decently playable. I seriously doubt it's ever been this playable. The action on the treble side is right around 85 thousandths, which is just really good for an acoustic guitar, I think. On the bass side, it's a little high, about 100, 110 thousandths at the most, but still in all, when you're only talking say 15 thousandths too much high, that's 3 human hairs. It's not very much. So it sounds like a lot, but it's not very high. So, you know, in terms of playability compared to where this thing was when it came here, it's almost perfect now. We really did do a lot of work on that bridge. That old tailpiece shined up really nice. See that? The back of the guitar, I don't know if I've even shown it to you, but it's just really super nice. It's just clean, you know, just as clean and nice a guitar as you'd ever want to find. And this is Samson, and Samson is the owner of this guitar, and I asked him to sit on camera here with me and talk a little bit about the history of this old guitar, what he knows about it.
It's my dad's guitar, yeah, and if he was living, he'd be 122 years old, and he bought that guitar when he was a teenager.
Wow, and that's something. Yeah, that's really something.
And I'm the child of 17 kids. I'm number 16.
He's the 16th child.
One mom and dad, yeah.
Wow. One mom and dad.
There's
wow.
only 5 of us living yet.
There's only 5 now living. Wow, that's something. It's sad in one way,
yeah.
But
Lord's really been good to us.
This is a great guitar. I really think this is a fine old guitar. It's one to be proud of for sure. Samson's a real big fan of the gospel music, so we're going to play a little gospel tune here for you. There are people who would rather live in mansions, people who would rather live alone, people who would trade God's promise for the glories to hold. There are people who would rather live in splendor and brag about the silver and their gold, but I'd rather have a little log cabin by the side of the road. I'd rather live by the side of the road and try to point souls to their blessed abode than to be a king or a millionaire and live in a mansion in bright array. I'd rather do a neighborly deed for a traveler here or a friend in need. I'd rather live by the side of the road and help some pilgrim along life's way, and help some pilgrim along life's way. Neat old guitar. Let you hear it just by itself so you can hear it. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to give us a thumbs up. If you're not yet subscribed, please click the subscribe button. Thank you so much for watching.